U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance is on a three-day visit to Israel just a week after his boss, President Donald Trump, was there after brokering a historic ceasefire between Israel and Hamas to end the more than 2 years of the Gaza war. Vance met with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and impressed upon him the need to preserve the guidelines of the ceasefire and also for both parties to adhere to the ceasefire conditions. There are concerns in the Trump White House that Netanyahu may not stay the course on the ceasefire, as the firings and the killings have already begun, and that could bury what is already a fragile ceasefire. Hence, J.D. Vance was dispatched hurriedly in what seems like a damage control mission.
There is this weird attitude I've sensed in the American media, in the Western media, where there's almost this desire to root for failure, that every time something bad happens, that every time that there's an act of violence, there's this inclination to say, oh, this is the end of the ceasefire, this is the end of the peace plan. It's not the end. It is, in fact, exactly how this is going to have to happen when you have people who hate each other, who have been fighting against each other for a very long time. We are doing very well. We are in a very good place. We're going to have to keep working on it, but I think we have the team to do exactly that.
Israel and Hamas agreed earlier this month to a truce in their 2-year war based on parts of a 20-point plan outlined by President Trump. Then on the 13th of October, the Palestinian terror group Hamas handed over the 20 living Israeli hostages that it was still holding in Gaza on the same day that Trump arrived there and brokered the ceasefire. In return, Israel released nearly 2,000 Palestinian prisoners. Though barely 10 days old, the ceasefire is already under strain as Vance began his trip to Israel. In fact, Vance is scheduled to meet Netanyahu as well as, of course, other leaders of the Israeli government and meet with members of the Israeli parliament. His visit is expected to last until Thursday. But analysts say that the visit was intended to send a warning signal both to Israel and to Hamas not to undermine the truce. For now, both Israel and Hamas say they are committed to the ceasefire, despite there being repeated flare-ups of violence in the last few days. Several Trump officials who spoke to the New York Times recently and expressed their apprehension in private that there were serious concerns within the administration that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu may not keep his end of the bargain. He may end up vacating the ceasefire. Vance, in his Israel trip, was joined by Steve Witkoff, who is Trump's Middle East envoy, and by Jared Kushner, who is Trump's son-in-law, both of whom were involved in the ceasefire as well as were in Israel to monitor how the ceasefire is being kept by both sides. Both of these gentlemen were instrumental in brokering the deal alongside mediators from Egypt, Qatar and Turkey. In a speech to the Israeli parliament, Knesset, ahead of the visit by Vance, Netanyahu offered that he's going to discuss two contentious issues with Vance.
נשוחח על שני דברים, בעיקר שני דברים, על האתגרים הביטחוניים שעומדים בפנינו וההזדמנויות המדיניות שעומדות בפנינו. נגבר על האתגרים, נממש את ההזדמנויות.
On Sunday, Palestinian terrorists fired on Israeli soldiers in the southern Gaza city of Rafah. In the process, 2 Israeli soldiers were killed. In response, Israel launched a wave of strikes that left at least 45 Palestinians dead, according to the Gazan Health Ministry. The violence was short-lived, but analysts have warned that the truce is likely to be tested again and again before both sides move to the second phase. Israeli forces have also attacked Palestinians who said they crossed a demarcation line where Israeli military forces had withdrawn to. They also closed the Rafah border crossing in the south, which is the only border point between Gaza and Egypt. Trump and his mediators are hoping to build on the ceasefire and realize an ambitious post-war vision for Gaza. As per that plan, Hamas fighters would lay down their weapons, then there would be an international force that would take charge of the security of Gaza, and eventually there will be an independent Palestinian administration that would assume control of Gaza and its governance. Hamas has expressed serious reservations about disarming its fighters, and both sides are yet to carry out significant parts of the initial first point of the ceasefire agreement, which pertain to the release of the hostages. There are also suspicions of Hamas giving up any role in a future Gaza. The bodies of about 15 hostages, which Hamas is obligated to return to Israel under the ceasefire, are still in Gaza. Hamas, in turn, had handed over the bodies of 13 other hostages who were Israeli hostages who had died in the last 2 years of this war. Israel, in return, has returned the bodies of more than 100 Palestinians. In this exchange, Hamas says it was facing enormous difficulty in excavating some of the remains because of the changed landscape in Gaza, where cities have been completely reduced to rubble because of this war.
We made a deal with Hamas that, they're going to be very good, they're going to behave, they're going to be nice, and if they're not, we're going to go and we're going to eradicate them if we have to. They'll be eradicated, and they know that. So they went in, and I don't believe it was the leadership, but they had some rebellion in there among themselves, and they killed some people, a lot of people. But this is a violent group. You probably noticed over the last 100 years, this is a very violent group of people. And they got very rambunctious, and they did things that they shouldn't be doing. And if they keep doing it, then we're going to go in and straighten it out, and it'll happen very quickly and pretty violently, unfortunately.
Israeli leaders, including Netanyahu, have accused Hamas of violating the deal by not immediately returning the remains of all the hostages who are dead. Israel has retaliated by keeping the Rafah crossing between Gaza and Egypt closed until further notice. The war in Gaza began with the October 7th attack 2 years ago, which killed about 1,200 Israelis and saw about 250 being taken hostage back to Gaza. All of the alive hostages have now been returned to their families. In response, Israel launched a devastating campaign in Gaza that so far killed more than 68,000 people.
Fighting so long and so hard that they don't know what the they're doing.